Hi, my name is Matt Callahan, the Oshkosh United Director of Coaching, and in this video I'm going to talk about the 2020 tryout process, which will be taking place July 13th to the 15th. We'll go over some general info, we'll talk about the U.S. Soccer play-on protocol that clubs are following, we'll talk about the check-in process for tryouts. It's really important that the players are very aware of what that process is going to be before they come to the tryouts. We'll talk about what players need to bring, the safety guidelines we'll be following. I'll touch briefly on the activities we're going to do, and then we'll talk about the offer process. So the tryouts will be at the 20th Avenue YMCA. When you enter the parking lot, if you proceed to the right, you'll see a little service road that will take you around the YMCA. And once you get behind the YMCA, there will be 5 soccer fields, and you'll see a check-in area once you get behind the Y. The schedule for tryouts is posted on the website. I sent an email out last week, but again, as a reminder, we updated the schedule for the 2008 boys and the 2007 and 2008 girls. We added a tryout for each of those age groups. And then for the 2004 and the 2005 girls, we extended the tryout time from an hour to an hour and a half. So those updates are all on the select tryout section of the website. The one thing I really want to stress is that when we select teams, it is always a combination of player performance throughout the season as well as tryout performance. As a club, we put a lot more emphasis on how a player has performed throughout a season than how they do at a 1 or sometimes 2-day tryout. We have asked all of our coaches to provide feedback in the form of a player evaluation that has been turned into us. And so we'll evaluate those as well as the tryout experience. I bring this up because we're at some crazy times right now. And I know we have people that have all different comfort levels with attending an in-person tryout at this point. And what I absolutely don't want anyone to do is I don't want them to feel pressured like they have to come to an in-person tryout if they're not comfortable with that. We have the capability to do a Zoom tryout. We could rely on the coaching evaluation. We could, if someone has signed up for our summer training, socially distant training, we could use one of those as a tryout. So we have lots of options, but I don't want anyone to feel like they're going to get scored poorly if they don't show up to a tryout. Absolutely not the case. And if you have some reservations about attending tryouts, I just urge you to shoot me an email, matt@oshkoshunited.com or tryouts@oshkoshunited.com, and we will accommodate any way we can. Looking into the future, I don't see the fall being a whole lot different than where we're at now. I'm not a doctor. I don't pretend to be a doctor. But I would assume until a vaccine is created or a highly effective treatment, there's just going to be some risk involved with any youth activity. And quite frankly, there's always been risk involved with playing any type of sport. But obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic adds a layer of risk there. What we will do as a club, I listened to a great webinar from the U.S. Soccer Chief Medical Officer, and he just talked about the importance of mitigating as much risk as you can, as often as you can, whenever you can, to make the environment as safe as possible. So I really think that's going to be our target moving forward, is doing what we can to mitigate risk, to make the environment safe, with the understanding that there's always going to be some risk involved until a vaccine or highly effective treatment has been created. So here are the play-on guidelines. Our tryouts are going to be at about phase 1.5. The Wisconsin Youth Soccer Association allows clubs, or they tell clubs when we can move throughout the different phases. So we've been doing phase 1 training for the last couple weeks. About 2 weeks ago, Wisconsin Youth Soccer said we could move into phase 2. For the purpose of our training, because we advertised we'd be doing phase 1 training, we have not moved the teams on to phase 2 for our training. But for tryouts, we will do, like I said, a phase 1.5. Phase 1 involves activities in which the players are 6 feet apart at all times. Phase 2 allows for larger groups and it allows for players to have contact during training. Again, I said earlier, I saw a great webinar from the Chief Medical Officer of US Soccer, and he talked about players having contact with each other for a brief moment during a scrimmage is relatively low risk compared to an activity like sitting around at a water break for 3 minutes when you're in sustained close contact with other people. So again, things that might be a high risk, we'll look to modify. So our water breaks will have players 6 feet apart at all times. When we're explaining an activity, we won't have the players right next to each other. They'll be 6 feet apart at all times. So that way we can mitigate that risk as much as possible. The check-in process, if a player is currently doing the summer training, this is going to be a different process. So it's really important that players understand how this works. The first thing is we're asking all players and any family member that checks in with the player to wear a mask. We're asking this because one change that we'll have from our summer training is we'll be taking the temperature of every player upon arriving. Now, obviously, we would still encourage families to take their temperature at home. Any temperature above 100.4 means a player will not be allowed to participate in the training. So if you're taking it home and it's above 100.4, then obviously please stay home. But we'll be asking players and again, any family members to wear a mask for the safety of the volunteers that we'll have that will be checking these temperatures. They'll be using a non-contact infrared thermometer. If someone does have a high temperature, they can go hang out in the car or the shade for 5 minutes. They can try it again. But if anyone has a temperature higher than 100.4, they won't be allowed to attend the tryouts. After players get their temperature taken, that will be the very first thing they'll do. So as players are arriving, we'll have multiple temperature people that will be taking temperatures. Once players get their temperature taken, they can proceed to a socially distant line. We'll have cones that will be at least 6 feet apart. And once players get to those to their spot, they'll get checked in with a tent. And once they're checked in, they'll have a health questionnaire that they'll be asked, and then they'll be given hand sanitizer to put on their hands. And then after that, they will proceed to the tryout area. We will not be using tryout pennies this year. Instead, we've had labels printed up that will be peeled off and just put on the player's shirt. And so that process will happen once the players get to the tryout area. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So items to bring: players should bring a mask for check-in. They should bring their own soccer ball. They should bring a dark shirt, which could be maybe green or black, and then a white shirt. And again, we're doing that because we're not going to be using pennies. So once players get to the tryout area, we'll sort them into groups. We'll make sure we have an equal number of dark shirts and white shirts, and then we'll have them put their labels on and we'll be ready for the tryout. Please, players, bring plenty of water. It's been hot lately. We're going to be moving around a bit, so bring plenty of water. The US Soccer Play-On recommendation is that if it's disposable water bottles, that you label it somehow, so that way players don't accidentally use someone else's water. So a little bit about the safety guidelines. Players will be in groups of 10 for the duration of the tryout. So even if we have a larger group of 30 players trying out, once players get there, they'll be put in groups of 10, and then they won't interact with other players throughout that tryout. That group of 10 will have a spot for them to put their bag, to put their water, and those spots will be at least 6 feet apart, so that way players will be socially distant when they're checking in. They'll be socially distant when they're taking water breaks. And half of the activities that we do will be socially distant, and then the other half will have either a 2v2 up to a 5v5 scrimmage. We're asking parents to remain in cars during the tryouts, or they can, certainly drop off and come back and pick up at the end, just in the interest of making sure people are at least 6 feet apart. It's probably easier if parents are in cars for the duration of the time. Training gear won't be shared, so again, we won't be having shared tryout pennies like we would have in the past. Players won't be touching the ball with their hands, so there won't be any throw-ins. We'll be taking attendance for contact tracing purposes. Again, players are going to have a health questionnaire and a temp check. Coaches will be wearing masks. We'll be disinfecting equipment between uses, so like cones, tables, and things like that. And players, lots and lots of hand sanitizer. Players will have hand sanitizer when they check in. We'll have hand sanitizer for players to use before they get a drink, or anytime they want to use hand sanitizer, we'll have that available for safety purposes. So the tryout activities, what's the day going to be like? It'll be check-in. They'll have an individual warm-up where they'll be at least 6 feet apart at all times. They'll do some socially distant technical activities, either dribbling or passing, depending on the age group. And again, for that part of the tryout, they'll be 6 feet apart at all times. And then we'll do a small-sided scrimmage. That's like the phase 2 part of the tryout, where it will be a 2v2 up to a 5v5 scrimmage, depending upon how many people are in the group and what age group it is. I'd like to talk a little bit about the offer process. The Wisconsin Youth Soccer Association has set dates that all clubs have to follow. So offers will be sent out on July 21st, that is a Tuesday, at noon. Once we send out offers, families have 24 hours to respond. When they respond, you have to do 2 things to accept your spot. We'll send out an email. The first thing you would have to do is to respond back to that email saying, yes, I accept this spot. And in that email we send out, there will be a link to fill out an online form. And you also need to fill out that online form in addition to responding back to the email to accept your spot. That online form will ask what seasons you'd like to play in. You'll have the option of playing fall only, spring only, or both. If you're a high school soccer player and you'll be playing a high school sport, then you might only have one season as an option. We would also ask, if you decide that you're not going to accept your spot, please respond back to the email and let us know that as well as soon as you know. We might have families on a waiting list. We might have to do some roster shuffling. So if you're not going to accept your spot, we'd ask that you please respond back and let us know as well. Once we've heard back from everyone, then we'll send out an email to the team confirming the roster. We don't share the roster until we have a confirmation from everyone, because again, until we know if everyone has responded, the roster may change. So once we hear back from everyone, you'll get a confirmation email confirming the roster, and then it's going to have some steps after that as well. Now, these next steps could typically take place over the course of a month, but because of the incredibly short turnaround, because tryouts are so late this year, this stuff is probably going to happen over the course of a week or 2 weeks max. So after you get that roster confirmation, you're going to get an email from Stefan Soccer. That's our uniform supplier. If you're a brand new player, it will have information about the uniform you need to order. In addition to that, obviously any players that are returning, if they want a larger uniform, they can order a uniform as well. The uniform numbers are assigned by the club. They're assigned in a way that no players in the same age group can have the same number. They're assigned in a way where if a player plays up, no one in that age group would have that number as well. So the uniform numbers are assigned by the club. The other thing you'll get is you'll get an email from Demisphere. That's the registration system asking you to accept your spot in Demisphere. Doing that is what allows us to have player cards made, which will be needed for any games. So when you get that Demisphere email, please accept it, and that will allow you to pay the registration fee and the fall season fee as well. And as always, there will be the option to pay those things in installments if you would like to do it that way. So in preparation for filling out that paperwork, please start thinking about what seasons your son or daughter is planning on playing. As I said earlier, who knows what fall is going to be like? I guess my advice would be think about fall as if it's today. If you were going to play a game today, would you be comfortable playing or not? If yes, then, and you're interested, sign up for fall. If you're not comfortable, that is certainly understandable as well. Just sign up for spring, and we'll pick up at that point. But again, if you have any questions about the tryout process, please don't hesitate to reach out. And again, as I said, if you're not comfortable attending an in-person tryout, we absolutely understand that as well. Don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great day.